managed to get back. Others will come, I'm sure, very soon. Let me take this opportunity of thanking, before beginning the proceedings, which we have some very interesting sessions coming up, and I'm sure you'll be as thrilled by them this afternoon as you were this morning. And so I'd like to take this opportunity first to thank our partners who have made this event possible. I'd like to thank the title partner, Yes Bank, powered by partner, Facebook, sustainability partner, Tata Steel. I'm a big fan of Tata Steel, by the way. I did a film on Jamshedji and G.R.D. Tata called Keepers of the Flame, and I was absolutely amazed to learn the story of the Tata's beginning and how this empire was founded and how philanthropic it remains to this day. The other power partner is Ravin, infrastructure partner is GE, MA partner is GSA, digital partner is Perfios, fintech partner is Clicks, RPA and AI partner is UiPath, and celebration partner is Diageo, and the country partner is Ireland. The knowledge partner is Bennett University. We sincerely thank all of them for their support in making this event possible and for bringing all their brand's value to the excellence of this global business summit. Now, our next speaker is a man who, together with his three brothers, is often seen at the top of the rich list in the United Kingdom, year after year. Starting small, his companies now span the globe. I've had the opportunity of knowing him for decades, and his brothers, so I know that he knows more than a thing or two about family, local, and global businesses. So please put your hands together to welcome the star of many local and global businesses as he comes to tell us what it means to act local, think global. Please welcome Mr. G.P. Hinduja. Gopi Hinduja. Mr. G.P. Hinduja, please. The audience awaits you. And after Ms. Hinduja speaks, wherever if you wish, better speak from there, sir. And after he speaks, we'll open the session for some question answers, because I'm sure many of you have questions for a man who's achieved so much in so many continents of the world. Mr. G.P. Hinduja.
Distinguished dignitaries, Mr. Vineet Jain, organizers of Economic Times, and dear friends, I am really honored to be asked to speak, but I have been thinking, after the Prime Minister such a good speech giving India's real picture from 1911 to now, and then having Sadhguru giving the wisdom, what would you like to hear from me? However, the theme given to me is act local, think global. Now, this is one of the cardinal principles of my late father, the founder of the Hinduja Group. In 1919, he had 5 strong principles based on which the group still works all over the world. One of them is act local, think global, but 5 of them, one is word is a bond. He always believed in one thing, that these contracts, lawyers have no meaning. If you have a good person to deal with, word should be a commitment. Then work to give. He never worked to earn money or run after profit. He always believed that money is to live and to make others happier. That is why in our family, everything belongs to everyone, nothing belongs to anyone. The third one is growth with partnership. We are today in 48 countries, surviving only because of one thing. We have always tried to find a good partner whose culture we can understand and our culture he can understand. Because if you go in a foreign country, you have to adopt the culture, and you also have to make sure that if you can learn to speak the local language where they feel more comfortable. And there has to be the fifth one, which is advance fearlessly. If you make up a determination, then you don't have to worry. Ups and downs will be there. These uncertainties, what we have in the world, in my opinion, have been there for last 100 years. It's nothing new. However, today's uncertainties are affecting the economy, but the opportunities are only in these uncertainties, where you can even make much bigger fortune. Today, if you look, we don't know what's going to happen with US-China tariff. We do not know what is going to happen to Qatar, what is going to happen to Iran, what is going to happen in Middle East. One thing is for sure, that Indian democracy is strong. India is the best destination to invest. From all my activities, we have tried our best to find good opportunities to come and invest here. I may be a British passport holder, but my heart is Indian and I believe in India. Friends, in today's uncertainties, I can only leave one thought with all of you, that whatever you are doing, don't focus only on one activity. You should have diversified activities and diversified geographies. That is how our group not only has grown, but sustained. Otherwise, you will see in each and every group there are ups, downs, bankruptcy. At least we have not understood what is Chapter 11 or what is bankruptcies. So the credit and the tribute goes to our founder, who really believed only in one thing, that keep on doing your work, don't expect the results, be nice to people, make them happy, and whatever you can do for the society, keep on doing. Never end your day without doing something good for someone. I personally, at the age of 17, was pushed to Iran, left my education to help my late elder brother to expand our business. I was really getting mad because I wanted to enjoy my college life, which I could not. I never understood what was Iranian language, and in those days there was no English there. Nobody spoke Hindi, but the compulsion and the need, necessity, makes you understand everything. Believe me, in 4 weeks' time, sitting in the office and hearing what they were talking, I was able to catch up with the language, because I came to a thought that unless I know the language, I won't be able to do anything. But I didn't go to any school or classes or took any lessons for that. Then it was also important to start writing Persian. Now, it was not an easy thing. But when we went into the Bollywood movies, I used to take interest, how should I advertise? How should we do? So I used to give them the wordings and then catch up. For example, Sangam. How is S-A-N-G-A-M? And this in Persian, I used to register it here. And that's how today, not only I can read and write and speak Persian, but most of the languages of the world, I manage it quite sufficiently well to be able to do my business. If I am in France, people go there to enjoy and have fun. But my programs, there are from morning 7 to 11 p.m. with continuous meetings and with continuous work. I believe only in one thing, that we have to keep on doing our karma. Although my children, my brothers, my family, they say this is the right age for retirement. But I never understood what is retirement. Even if I go for a holiday, I take my secretary, I take my staff with me. From early morning to 11, I am on work. After 11, I join my family. Now, that is what has kept me going. And my advice to you people will be, keep on doing your karma, which will help you long way. You have to sometimes see when I am going for holidays with a family, I can really not have more than 2-3 hours. I get bored. I like to do something new. I like to do something different. Even in my office, you will never find me consistent in one vertical. I always try to find new opportunities and to see what we can get. And to all of you, I can only say one thing. In today's world of uncertainties, believe me, only way is act local, think global. And today in India, the cost is low. Get technology from outside, and you can do it. I can give you a simple example. 2 years back, I got, as I mentioned to you early morning, I am in St. James Park. American was walking with me, and he said, Mr. Hinduja, why don't you get into cyber security? Now, we don't have any investment committees or anything. We brothers take decisions on the spot. When I visited Silicon Valley, I found he was spending big money to develop this solution, this product. So I told him, look, I will buy 51% with one condition, that I will take it home to develop it. And I was able to develop it at 1/5 of the cost and in 6 months instead of 2 years. And today we are unique and we are the only one having this technology. We call it anti-hacking. Whether it is for banks, whether it is for hospitals, whether it is for your smartphones and you want to be sure your girlfriends don't get, your wife doesn't get your girlfriend's number, it will be well protected. Now, act local, think global is the best. Stick to it and you will be very happy with me and remember me. But if you want anything to ask from me, I am happy to reply. No questions? Good. Then thank you, gentlemen. All the best. Huh? What? Boss, this is business summit. If in that Malik Tere Bande Hum, everyone will get up and go away. Yeah. Put the question again.
What is your Director of EIL as an Independent Director, Government of India, and Chartered Accountant. Sir, what is your views and what is your message to our unorganized sector workers unemployed in country?
Message to the unorganized sector.
Now, when you say unorganized, what sectors are you bringing in? Because each sector has a different formula.
See, in our country, recently data has come that the government has given employment in unorganized sector heavily, like agri, like your priority landing, like your suburb, smaller cities. So for those who are working there, what kind of message you are giving them to be organized and be positive, and they should do better for the country and for your GDP?
My message is very simple. They should do where they think they are good for, and whatever they do, they should not do with compulsion. They should do with love. Once they do anything with love, they will be successful. And not only they will be successful, they will become someone themselves employer and employ more people.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. One last question because we're running over time now.
Mr. Hinduja, I have a question for you. You mentioned that India is the best destination to invest in right now. Can you give us a sense of which, if there are any particular sectors or pockets of opportunity specifically that you are seeing here as a group and that you identified to invest further in?
In my view, technology and consumer item. Banking and finance will always going to sustain and will survive. But consumer item is today number one. And if more and more, faster the reforms go, more and more, it becomes easier to operate and work here. What I have said, you heard from the Prime Minister also. He said that this is going to be the third top economy in the world. Okay?
Okay, one last question, sir, from you.
Sir, the last question. My name is Nagraj Meda. I'm an entrepreneur in the risk management consulting business. Today in the private equity kind of environment, people say you get the investment, dilute yourself, scale, sell and get out. But our traditional family is you have to run the business and exit is not the main focus. What do you advise an young first generation entrepreneur? Should we...
You see, this is the question which goes with our group, and it's a subject of my heart. We are an investor group. But the difference between the private equity and us is the private equity invests and they want to make money in 3-4 years and get out of it. Whereas we like to invest and take it up along with us with growth, but we keep 51%, that is our investment policy, and we manage, and even if there are stressed projects, are projects where technology is needed and cash dry they are, we help them. But we don't like to act like private equities, nor do we take private equities with us. If sovereign funds come, they want to be partners with us, we will welcome them because they are long-term players and they are not short-term. One of the reasons why you find so many NPAs here, because they join hands with private equity, they get into the trouble with the government not recovering their money, and you get into trouble. So there is no need of private equity. Take them as a partner and let them invest on long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Hinduja sir. Thank you so much. We value your words of wisdom and all you've given us. Next, we have a panel discussion on a subject that affects everyone who uses the internet, in fact, anyone who communicates on a telephone, which means all of us. Data regulation, privacy, and the power of the world's most valuable resources. to discuss this extremely thorny and complex issue, which pits our fundamental right to privacy against the government's duty to provide security to all its citizens. We have a fantastic group of experts, CEOs, and entrepreneurs. So please welcome onto the stage Gulshan Rai, Chief of Cybersecurity at the Prime Minister's Office, India; Ritesh Agarwal, founder of Oyo Rooms; Alan Mamedi, co-founder and CEO of Truecaller; Amit Shah, Group President and Head of Corporate Strategy, FinTech Marketing and Communications at Yes Bank; and Osama Bedier, founder and CEO of Point, spelled P-O-Y-N-T. Moderating the discussion will be Archana Rai, Editor South of the Economic Times. Let's all warmly welcome them as they discuss data regulation, privacy, and the power of the world's most wonderful resource. Could you please come on stage? We are expecting the panelists on stage. How wonderful to see you. Most welcome. Let me repeat. Archana Rai, Editor South of the Economic Times, will be conducting the discussion. And there's Gulshan Rai, Chief of Cybersecurity PMO; Ritesh Agarwal, founder of OYO Rooms; Alan Mamedi, co-founder and CEO of Truecaller; Amit Shah, Group President and Head of Corporate Strategy, FinTech Marketing and Communications, Yes Bank; and Osama Bedier, founder and CEO of Point. Gulshan Rai is the National Cyber Security Coordinator. He didn't want me to correct it, but I insist on correcting it. So that is his designation. National Cybersecurity Coordinator. Good luck with the discussion. All the best, Archana.
We have a wonderful panel here, I think, for what is bound to be a really stimulating discussion, given that issues of data are something that affects each one of us here in the room and everyone outside, of course. So it isn't a technical issue anymore, it's a common person's issue. So, you know, the novelist Yuval Harari has spoken of the need for countries with what he refers to as lax data protection laws, what he calls the data colonies, to band together to represent themselves in negotiations with so-called data owners, countries with advanced artificial intelligence capabilities mostly. So really, if data is the new oil, Harari argues that there is need for a grouping akin to the OPEC. Now that's something that I would like our panelists to probably talk about. But what really is clear is the importance and the urgency for having frameworks and safeguards, both to ensure that the economic value of data is realized, and of course, there is security and protection. And really, in India, I think the issue is really far more closer than we can think of it. We have about 650 million Indians who will be online by 2020. And in another 2 years after that, over 800 million Indians are expected to use smartphones. That just gives us an idea of the amount of data that is going to be generated. On that note, I would like to begin the discussion by asking Mr. Rai, is there merit in the argument that India must not fall prey to data colonization?
Thank you, Archana, and thanks, Mr. Bedi, for the kind introduction. Archana, if you look at the issue of the data colonization you talk about, look at the conditions under which, or the requirement under which we are talking about such a concept. Let me start what you said, data is a oil there. Now, oil is a colonization there. If you take that concept, Yes, certainly then data should be colonized. If you say that data is oil, then you should be done. But that's not the exact thing. In fact, the data is much more complex than what the oil is there. When we were waiting inside that attached room, I was talking to Mr. Dhanendra Kumar, who was the ED in the World Bank and he held senior position in the government there as a secretary. See, the data, same data can be sold to many people. Oil cannot be sold to many people. Oil is under someone's ownership and some possession there. Data is not under someone's ownership and someone's possession. And today, Honorable Prime Minister said $10 trillion economy and $5 trillion is achievable in next couple of years, and we are talking about $1 trillion digital economy. Now, when we talk about digital economy, the data communication, data flows from one end to another end, and it passes through many elements there. Every element collects the data there. Then who owns the data? Who owns the responsibility of a data leakage? That's one aspect. It has a very complex kind of a things. The second aspect of this industry, this sector is that there is a data monetization. Everything in the world of internet, what we get it, is available free to the citizens or free to anyone else. How do they meet the cost of the infrastructure which they install to provide services free? Data is collected and data is monetized, and in a different manner, whether you anonymize the data or whatever you do, but data is monetized there. Now, when you monetize the data, certainly there issues will come up there, and the issue of privacy certainly will come back over there. Now, when the data colonization, data localization talk about it, these issues will come up. Before that, I think we need to, if we have to really address that issue, we need to talk about data is a strategy. Like I said today, we must talk about and set out the things, sovereignty of the data, data ownership, data sovereignty. I think that's a larger issue which we need to set right. Till the time we do that, there will be issue because I have to purchase my data. It has a strategic value over oil and all kind of things there. So everyone talks about the things there. Whether we should have a colonization or we shouldn't have a colonization, that's the aspect we need to discuss it. But the trend worldwide, I'll just take a minute. Every country in the world is trying to colonize the data. In fact, those countries which are talking about they're against the colonization of data, they are colonizing the data much more than anybody else.
Sure. Ritesh, if we can just move to you, this of course, this can become, sort of a us versus them debate too. But really, what are without getting into that, what really are the checks and balances that you think are required before you can actually store data locally, before you take on data localization?
So I feel I'd like to begin with, extending on what Sir just mentioned, which is there's a fundamental difference in the parallel between how you would think about oil and personal data. And sorry, I'm just using it quite literally. I know that was not the sense that you had when you mentioned about it. I feel data is a very personal item, which is personal for every individual, and hence keeping the perspective of my data or an individual's data is only hers or his and not anybody else's is a very key characteristic behind how you extend the argument about data localization or non-localization. I think the second bit on localization, I believe that globalization is here to stay. There are going to be companies which are going to do business cross borders, companies coming into India, companies going out of India across the world. But that said, making sure that there is a certainty about visibility of critical national data is very valuable. And there are countries who have solved it very actively, whether it's in Europe very recently, whether Indonesia, every country is actively looking at it. And we, of course, recently the Sri Krishna Commission here in India has come up with their own views, which hopefully some of it will get implemented over the months.
So, Alan, I wanted to sort of bring you into this by asking how do societies look at this, right? There's the concerns of privacy. There is also the need really to belong to a connected world. How do you combine all of these various things and make sure that a consumer feels secure using the applications that you're talking of now?
Yeah. So, historically, technology has always evolved faster than laws and regulations. And so what's going to happen is natural. And I grew up in Sweden, and we started a company in Stockholm, Sweden, where data privacy and regulations has always been key. And that's sort of how you grow up as well, if you live in that society. So for us personally, it's been extremely important to make sure that our data doesn't really belong to us. It belongs to our customers. And the reason why it does that is because the moment you believe as a founder or as a leader of a company that it belongs to you, that's the moment you will lose the trust of your customers. And when you lose the trust of your customers, you don't have a business anymore. So we have a very strong stance on this. And from day one, we've always been clear on what is it that Truecaller need and what is the value that you get back as a consumer. And how do you as a customer rectify and delete that data? Super simple. And I can give you an analogy that me and Nami talked about in the very early days. If Google indexes a website which writes about you, it's going to be impossible for you to get that website removed from the search engine. We wanted to do the total opposite. And I think that is the core of what we do, and that's what we talk about with all our employees in our company. And I think that's how all companies should think about data. It is very personal, as you said. I agree, 100%.
Amit, I'd like for you to come into this at this point because, now we're talking about financial data, for instance, where issues of privacy are even more, sort of acute. So are Indian companies really prepared to take on the investments required when data is stored locally? What are the safeguards that are required and how prepared are we really?
So I think a couple of points in what you mentioned here. First point is that banks are not just fiduciarily responsible for the money of our customers, right? And if data is such an important asset, then we are also responsible for the customer's data. And when I say this, banks, we like to do the KYC. We are supposed to do KYC. But here, as far as data is concerned, KYC has a very different meaning. Does your customer know what data I hold for him or for her? Does he or she know why I hold this data, right? And these are some of the points earlier echoed. And where is the control? That's the C, right? Who is controlling this data and the usage of data? And there are norms in EU, like you were mentioning that data privacy norms, some of those norms are coming up in India. At some stage, this KYC of data is going to take precedence on how we use this data. The second part, as far as security is concerned, I would like to start by saying that there is no foolproof system ever, right? If there is a highly secured system, there is a smarter guy who's trying to break that system. And the strength of a organization's data privacy architecture is not so much what is within, right? You can always put your firewalls, you can always put your security systems, but you're interacting with a whole lot of external vendors and supply chain partners, right? So the strength of the data protection is the strength of the entire system. And any weakness anywhere in the entire chain is going to derail the entire thing. And because a whole lot of data protection is now not rule-based, but driven by AI and ML algorithms, you need to fight an AI attack with an AI attack. If you're going to fight an AI attack with a rudimentary rule-based system, you're going to lose that war, right? So in future, data protection is going to be one AI, which is your good AI, and there's somebody else who's also equally smart, but is also attacking you through AI.
On that note, Osama, I wanted to ask you, you're at the heart really of the connected world, in the sense that, IoT and all of the other aspects that are, probably going to generate more data than we already have. You're really at the heart of that. How do you look at this? Do you think technology companies have kept the trust of users? Have they failed in assuring users that you can go ahead and transact? What do you think of it?
I don't think we failed yet, but we seem to be on a trajectory that does need to change course. Let me just go back briefly to the analogy of data and oil. I do agree from a monetization perspective that this is true. As resources come, this is the next generation resource where money will be built out of. But they're very different in that oil is a limited resource. Data is an unlimited resource. You can make unlimited copies of it. And the problem is in that. It's almost impossible to regulate all of the data in the world, trying, will be a waste of time. More data is generated every year now than all previous years of humanity. And so there is a role for the regulatory frameworks to play. And I think they need to be very super focused on what matters, because not all data is equal. Personal or personally identifiable information, or private information like my bank account information and my medical history, is very different than my public preferences I put on Facebook and Instagram. And they need to be treated very differently. From a regulatory perspective, we need to classify the most important data and put rules around it as it relates to consumer consent, permissions, transparency, control. And I think that's only a role governments can play. And they need to, I think, spend a lot more energy as opposed to letting technology companies create their own rules. But then in other areas, it is reputational. As a service provider, as a technology company, I have to be careful in how I treat my customers' information to continue to provide a good service.
So, Mr. Rai, how do you view this? Do you think there is a role for India to sort of take the lead in devising a world order on data protection?
No, I just, come back to what Amit said. See, there is let us leave what the issues which has been come out. Look at from the constructive angle also.
True.
The Chinese have said 2030 they will be the leader in the artificial intelligence, and Americans are in the leader, Western countries are the leader in artificial intelligence there. Now, when you talk about artificial intelligence, it's going to be embedded into every system, every device which is going to come. How, if you have to fine-tune your algorithm, whether for any new technology, he said IoT or he said AI, you need the data for fine-tuning your algorithm. Now, if that data should be available to the startup companies or the companies who are developing the technology, that itself will require some sort of some data governance kind of a framework, or maybe you may call localization or colonization will be required, because any country can't afford to not to get the data which they generate for the technology development in their own country. That's one aspect which is very, very important for the growth of the country, technology development, economic development, all is going to be a cyber-led kind of growth. Second is the aspect with the security and the law enforcement agency should be there. Timely data should be available and accessible. These are the two factors certainly which will go, and these are becoming an important driving for the data localization. And now coming back to your question, see, every country is trying to localize their data, there is no doubt about it. If you look at the Cloud Act or you look at the GDPR, they're all going in the direction of localization there. You need a mutual recognition and what you give, what I give, that kind of a system. Indirectly, the mutual legal assistance treaty is coming back in the form of those kind of a thing, and we have never been able to solve that angle worldwide. I think today there is a time, because the cyber is a uniform domain, it's artificial domain, it's going to be much more complex. We need a data governance framework, a worldwide data governance framework. And let us look at the maybe UN-led or WSO-led that data governance framework, and every country should adopt those kind of a framework and make it compatible to their kind of a thing. That's the only solution. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very difficult. And I'm in favor of a Data Protection Act, because we have no other option. Every country has done it, we also have it.
Have to do it.
And our businesses are finding very, very difficult to do
exactly. That was actually what I wanted to ask you. Have we, sort of missed out on opportunities by not having a
No, we are not.
framework in
the
place?
GDPR has come up in it's only about 10 months ago GDPR has come up there. And our Justice B.N. Krishna committee report has come up. I was a member there. And we wanted to convert into the law, but now we will certainly go for after the new government comes back, we will certainly go for the law. It's necessary to do that, because we also have to protect our own businesses, technology development, and other factors there.
Ritesh, I think we have little time, but I'd like to ask you, from a perspective of someone who runs a venture where you're dealing directly with consumers, who do you think has the greater responsibility in protection? Should a consumer be more conscious of how they use personal data and what they need to do to protect?
So, I think that's a very broad question. So I think generally speaking, customers increasingly are focused on convenience. And it is the responsibility of us as companies, and of course, eventually regulators and governments, to make sure that the customer convenience is not hampered at all, while making sure a sustainable data protection system is built out. I believe fundamentally, in what Sir was saying is data being available to local startups for making sure that they can use that. I think that's a very important part of the broader data privacy and data localization perspective. The only addition I would have on it is that data privacy is an extremely important module to have trust of the customers, like Alan mentioned. And basis that, it is extremely valuable that this data should always be available with anonymity.
That's right.
And anonymity being a very critical part of the whole subject, which I'm sure that the regulators are looking at, and increasingly as companies we are thinking about. But generally speaking, I feel that customers should, of course, be more educated, but that is the second priority. The first priority is companies and regulators taking a very responsible and sustainable view of the world, and making sure that what I mentioned a little while earlier, that an individual's data is their data. Respecting that is a very critical part of this.
Sure. I think we have little time left. Amit, I'd like to come back to you with, sort of the increasing incidences of data breaches. Really, the question everyone will have is, what is the banking industry doing to safeguard this? What are the, sort of measures that you would like to quickly highlight?
So see, as a bank, we believe that, data privacy, along with data availability, and like Ritesh was mentioning, ease of operations, right? Somewhere there is a little bit of trade-off. The higher number of locks that you put onto a process, the lesser and lesser it becomes enjoyable and an experience for the customer. But how do you balance it out? And we have a three-pronged framework, right? There are three levels of barriers that we put, right from how the CISO's office operates, how the governance framework happens, and how the audits happen, right? And what are the technical solutions that you put around protecting this data. But just to bring a lighter note to a reasonably technical subject, when you watch these heist movies, right, whether it is Italian Job or anything else, the eventual break is within a bank or within a storehouse of gold or something. But the entry point is never starting from there. The entry starts from some vague corner somewhere, right? So while I want to ensure that my customer has the best app on his mobile phone, I also want to ensure that it is dummy proof.
True.
I should not allow him to create a breach, right? My app has to be equally strong and enjoyable, because that's the entry point of most frauds.
True. Finally, to end, to Alan and to Osama, this is a question that I would like both of you to answer. Consumers should have ownership of data. Should they be able to trade and benefit from it?
Trade with it?
Get economic value out of it.
Well, I think it depends on the business model of the business. It's hard to say, but you can always build an ecosystem around it, similar to how Uber has done it, but that's based on services. I'm not so sure I would think that's a good idea around data, because then you incentivize in some way for people to sell parts of their personal information. And that's not the way I think the world should be going towards, to be honest.
Your take, Osama, on this?
I'll split the question into two parts. Ownership, absolutely. I think consumers need to own their data, especially personally identifiable information, as well as should have transparency around what others know about them. In terms of benefit from it, I think it's situational.
Okay.
There are things that you could do to harm yourself or others by benefiting from your data. That should not be allowed. But there are things where people profit off of you, and I think there's a really good argument for you to benefit when others profit from you.
Thanks very much. I think what really is clear is that we can look forward to a data protection regime in India very soon, which of course will both increase consumer confidence and also make it more possible for India to really take this space in what is clearly a new world order that's emerging. Thanks very much for being here, and for being such an interesting panel. Thank you.
This very stimulating discussion on data privacy reminded me of a story told by Bob Hope, the American comedian, at the height of the Cold War between America and Russia. He said, everyone says that nobody in Russia has got TV. So I went to Russia. Every Russian home has TV. The only difference is you don't watch it, it watches you. So that was the state of the Cold War. We now have a very special address by a man who is a very important minister, and accompanying him on stage will be Bodhisattva Ganguly, executive editor of the Economic Times. So could I request Mr. Bodhisattva Ganguly to be prepared to step on stage, because this special address is by the man who runs what millions of Indians travel on, the Indian Railways, which is the 4th largest rail network in the world. It's also the world's 8th largest employer, the world's 8th largest employer. And on top of that, he also runs what powers millions of Indian homes. Talking about multitasking, imagine how hard he must have to work. So please welcome the very hardworking, multitasking, Honorable Minister for Railways and Coal, Mr. Piyush Goyal. Accompanied by Mr. Bodhisattva Ganguly, Executive Editor of the Economic Times. Welcome, Piyush. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you are. That's an unusual question. Thank you, Piyush, for coming here. Why don't you go ahead and then I'll ask you a question so you can. You want to keep it only a Q&A? No. You should make some remarks and then.
Can we raise the sound level a little? I'm not hearing the minister very well. You can speak on all the other platforms.
You can speak from here. You want to use the mic? I think that's some problem.
Thank you, Kabirji. Thank you, Bodhi. Ladies and gentlemen. It's always very difficult to hold the attention of the audience so soon after the Prime Minister has given a very holistic view about the working of this government over the last 5 years. He has addressed the change that we were able to bring about in the working of Indian government over the last 5 years. I think he brought about the perspective of how things used to be done earlier, what was the way this government brought about a change. And I think that in some sense can be best understood in terms of the change of the mindset of the nation. The biggest, sometimes I'm asked, what do you think is the single most important achievement of this government? And I dare say it's the change in mindset of 130 crore Indians. Many of us are used to the Jugadu approach. We can manage anything and everything. सब कुछ चलता है. There were times when I just became the railway minister about 18 months ago. On one occasion when I was trying to drive in a lot of rapid change, and in that process was also a little critical of some of the things that were happening. One of the officers turned around and told me, sir, you'll have to appreciate, irrespective of who the minister is or whether any of us does our work or don't do our work, 12,000 trains leave every morning and they reach their destination. Now that can be a great complacency, that can be a great attitude for some, but not for Prime Minister Modi and his team. And I think over the last 5 years, that change in mindset has been probably the most challenging part of government. And I may dare say 5 years into government, the most satisfying part of our achievements. Today we have a nation of 1 billion plus people aspiring for a better quality of life and expecting those game-changing, those transformational outcomes. And you only expect something from a person you believe who can deliver. I mean, I would expect a good editorial because I know Bodhi can write a good editorial. And therefore, the morning preferred paper is going to be an Economic Times to know what's happening in the business world. And of course, now with the successful political pages, you can probably read the Economic Times and know exactly what's happening all across the world today. But I do that, I read that because I know he can deliver. If I didn't trust his ability, the ability of the Economic Times team to give me good news, good in the sense to give me complete news, smartly, that would not be my preferred paper. In the same way, if there's high aspiration, there's high demands on Prime Minister Modi and his government, I think it's a matter of great satisfaction for all of us because the people of India trust we can deliver. And if you see the way this government has taken up different projects over the last 5 years, there's a method to the projects that have been taken up. I remember a lot of criticism coming our way when we took up the Swachh Bharat mission, the Clean India mission, right in the first few months of this government. A lot of critics who said that Prime Minister is not expected to address cleanliness from the ramparts of the Red Fort when he's giving his Independence Day address. But as I look back 4.5 years later, I realized that behind this program, there was a huge outcome that he could foresee. An outcome on healthcare, for example, an outcome of the thinking of our people, an outcome possibly also impacting corruption levels. You are in a clean environment, you think differently. An outcome which will have deep impact on tourism potential of India, for example, and then correspondingly on the economy. So an investment in a cleaner India is economically a sound investment, was very much at the back of his mind. And then you look at the various projects that came one after the other. Be it Saubhagya, our effort to ensure that every single willing consumer in this country, every household wants an electricity connection, business of course included, should get electricity at the drop of a hat. And after all, on the ease of doing business rankings, I think electricity was one of the first large movements where India just leapfrogged in the world rankings. Cooking gas, the impact that cooking on wooden stoves or kerosene was having on our women's lives, particularly in rural India, could only have been appreciated by someone who has lived that life. Most of us in this room, including me, possibly have not lived a life where there was no electricity, or our mothers or sisters were cooking on a stove under wood or with kerosene. Many of us here would not probably appreciate that when he launches Ayushman Bharat, giving 500 million people, 50 crore of the lesser privileged sections of society, free healthcare, what a deep impact it's going to have in our productivity, the outcomes it will have on the cost that the nation pays for bad health, the outcome it will have on the social side in terms of better family life, in terms of better quality of life for our people, the outcomes it would have in terms of saving lakhs of families, maybe millions of families, who would be probably getting into poverty in the process of trying to save or improve the health of one member of the family, given high healthcare costs. And I think all these projects, when you look at them, they reflect two very important aspects of Mr. Modi's thinking. It's compassion, and that empathy, that compassion probably came out of his own early life experiences where he had to probably sell tea to passengers on the railway station or in the train, where he went to a school which did not have great facilities, which did not have equal opportunity for people of all sections of society, where at home he would have to study under a kerosene lamp or under a street light, where his mother would cook on a antiquated wooden stove, maybe smoking in 400 cigarettes, and the rest of the family also. Children in the room, in that small room, in a thatched hut. Now, all of these have probably defined his thinking, his compassion towards a section of society which has very often not figured in our horizon of thinking, of the policymakers, planners, business world. And the second is passion. The passion with which he takes up these projects, the passion with which he works through these initiatives. He guides them, motivates us to achieve sometimes very daunting targets. And this compassion and passion has led to these various initiatives, be it the effort to reach digital India to the remotest corners of the country, be it the effort to understand what artificial intelligence can do to help us improve the security situation in the country, to help us improve healthcare delivery in the country, provide wellness to our people, how artificial intelligence can impact the railways working, for example. So he's a person, a man in a hurry, runs a government in a hurry to deliver good governance to the people of India, and opening up opportunities for the business world, both Indian and international, to come to India, to make in India, to engage with over 130 crore Indians aspiring for a better future for them, for themselves and their children. A country willing to engage both on the one hand with the challenge of terrorism, on the other hand with the challenge of climate change, with passion and with compassion. And to my mind, the 130 crore Indian population, the 1.3 billion people of India, provide the greatest opportunity, an unparalleled opportunity for businesses both in India and around the world to come to India, to look at how economies of scale can help you meet the aspirations of 1 billion plus people, to see how modern technology can be leveraged and brought to India at scale, using Indian skilled manpower, using people looking for a better quality of life, for ease of living. Bring in the best technologies to India, produce in India, serve India in a cost-effective manner. And all of this makes good economic sense. And no better program than my own LED program to show that how a country can invest less than $2 billion, replace the lighting across the country both in homes, in industry, in infrastructure projects, in state utilities, in offices. Replace 1.4 billion incandescent bulbs with a nearly 10x more efficient LED bulb. Save the people of India $7 billion every year, year on year, with an investment as small as $2 billion. Reduce carbon emissions by 80 million tons every year. Bring down your peak load requirement by 20 gigawatt, thereby serving the people of India with more efficiency, smartly, economically, far, far more wisely. And to my mind, each and every one of the projects that this government has taken up, when benchmarked, both on the immediate gains, the life cycle costs, the impact both social and economic, I'm not even getting into the political impact of it, I believe you have seen 5 years where good governance and development has become an instrument of service. Economics and politics have both intermingled smartly so that good economics has also made for good politics. And that's that change in mindset that I think we have navigated over 4.5, 5 years. The report card is before the people of India, and we are now getting into the most important examination of a government's life. We do hope what I had mentioned in the Economic Times Awards ceremony as the initial findings will get better as the days go forward. Our first poll had indicated a 297 to 303 kind of range at which the Bharatiya Janata Party would secure seats, and about 360 to 365 as the National Democratic Alliance. Given the developments of the last few weeks where the NDA, the National Democratic Alliance, has expanded its footprint in newer areas, we have now an alliance in Tamil Nadu which sends 39 members of parliament and Puducherry 40 together. We have increased our presence in the Northeast significantly. So we are looking at a full sweep all across Northeast. We're looking at huge returns in states like West Bengal and Odisha in terms of expanding our footprint. Given the political developments of the last few weeks, we are now confident of not only retaining the 73 seats in Uttar Pradesh, but now we have a target of 74. No second guesses required for which that 74th seat is that we are targeting to win. And my own sense is, the tracking poll is going on, so maybe one of these days I'll share it with you, but my own sense is the people of India are looking to give Mr. Modi another term of a strong, stable, decisive government, a government that brings in a stable, simple, predictable regulatory and policy regime in the country, a government that has changed the mindset to an honest country, recognized as such by the world today, which is why today the world wants to engage with India. And I hope what Vineet said in the morning, the Davos of the East becomes, as we go forward, the next Davos itself. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Piyush, for that very comprehensive address. Thanks also for the nice words about the Economic Times, particularly with my boss present in the audience. So you've given me so I'll ask a few questions, and maybe you can take a couple of questions from the audience also. You've given me an obvious opening question. Then you seem to be very confident about the elections, 300 plus, which, I mean, in private, not many people in your own party or outside seem to be that confident. Why are you?
First of all, they are not privy to a lot of the information that I'm privy to, because the surveys that we are carrying out across the country is not a public document. It's a totally third-party initiative where we don't mix politics. And if too many people know about all of this, there are two risks. A, the survey results get manipulated or sullied. And B, the risk of complacency. So we certainly don't want anybody to start knowing that his seat is safe and his seat is good. I'd rather have all my candidates and all my leaders on edge so that they put in their best foot forward. But I'll tell you why I feel confident. It's very difficult sitting in this room, as I said earlier, to really understand the deep impact these programs have had to the last man at the bottom of the pyramid. People today are willing to move out of the traditional caste and religion and community-based voting patterns and looking at change in their own states. I mean, Tamil Nadu, I've been engaged a lot in the Tamil Nadu election. My survey results have surprised me. Now, I should have actually been able to bargain a far better deal. But again, because of this mindset and legacy issue, it's possibly not easy this time around. But truly, the impact that Mr. Modi has had in a state like Tamil Nadu, where it was assumed that the Dravidian politics will always prevail and India will never move beyond that, we are seeing some surprising results when it comes to Mr. Modi's popularity and the impact his programs have had on the ground. So I personally believe it's the people in the villages, in the slums, at the bottom of the pyramid who have felt the impact of this the maximum. The vocal societies who meet with editors of Economic Times, and to the extent to which your teams can reach out to, is a section which may at times be a little disappointed also, because in some sense, when a country moves its tax to GDP ratio by 20%, from nearly 10.25% to 12.25%, it's not a mean achievement. It really clearly means that the tax base has expanded, tax compliances are becoming better. And to the credit of Honorable Finance Minister Mr. Jaitley, it's been 5 years of good, prudent economic management that has helped India reach where we are today, both on economic fundamentals and the social benefits reaching the last man at the bottom of the pyramid. This kind of a combination, India and Indians have craved to see for years and years. And that's what empowers or strengthens my conviction that this government is going to be re-elected with an even better result than last time.
74 seats in UP.
I don't know whether you noticed our last campaign. Namumkin nahi, mumkin hai. Did he say it? Okay. So for us, tell me, did you ever imagine we would get 73 in the first place last time around? No. You didn't. Did you ever imagine that in the assembly election, which was 3 years after the government had come in, 3 years after 2014 nearly, did you imagine us getting 325 seats? A feat which has never happened in independent India. Uttar Pradesh, with all its diversities, giving 80% of the seats to a single party has never, ever happened in the history of independent India. Tripura, we had a 1% vote share in Tripura, 1% in 2014, with all of Mr. Modi's popularity. We won the assembly with 51% vote share, 51%. So for you, it may be very difficult to imagine that West Bengal is going to give us a huge victory. Very difficult for you to imagine. But it's possible, because when the mood turns, it turns very swiftly. And the people are seeing the fruits of development that other parts of India are getting. And they are seeing that why my state is not, for example, engaging with Ayushman Bharat. Why is the state government keeping me deprived of health care?
Referring to Mamta's decision to withdraw from Ayushman.
So I think the sense on the ground, the development, we just launched the Vande Bharat Express. Now, it's very easy to deride the success of Make in India. But I personally believe failure helps me to better myself every time. So if I had a glitch on its return journey, which was not a commercial journey, just an empty train, some journalists did hop onto it, so they got privy to it. But I think that's great that in a test run like that, or a return journey, empty, non-commercial journey, I can understand what needs to be done better. I can understand, do I need to improve my battery power? Do I need to take care of cattle runovers, which is a problem that the railways faces? And this being a train set, a new modern technology, it's not really planned or prepared for cattle runovers. So all of these are learnings which I am happy to learn from. I would not deride my talent of my engineers. So I'd in fact once asked this of a journalist, that if you write one wrong piece or you make one mistake in your editorial or in your piece in the newspaper, does your editor sack you or does he counsel you? But of course, sometimes one can see a campaign. So if I keep making mistakes every day, then suddenly we'll have to be concerned.
Okay, so let me just shift to business for this thing. So one, I mean, undoubtedly some of the achievements of the Modi government have been remarkable. Cleanliness is, I think, part of the national consciousness. So is Ayushman Bharat appears to be a game changer in its early days. So the the electrification program has attracted worldwide attention. So those things cannot be denied. But in one aspect, I think, I'm sure you're a bit disappointed. I mean, if you look at the stance of BJP, of the Bharatiya Janata Party, over the years, it has generally been regarded as a party which is more sympathetic perhaps to the private sector and private Indian companies, and having in that sense a more pro-market kind of a leaning than the Congress. If you look at the Vajpayee government, for instance. So these 5 years have been marked by a lack of private sector investment. Why do you think that is the case, and how can you bring it back?
Both.
Infrastructure, yeah.
Bodhi, I mean, look, the only thing that comes to mind is that old elementary, my dear Watson. That's the only answer I can give to you. The BJP's always believed in integrity of processes and good governance. That's been our first and foremost credo as a party. The Jansangh was initiated and started to bring about honesty and good governance in this country. Prime Minister Modi is following that rich tradition set by our stalwarts, be it Deen Dayal Upadhyay, be it all the people who over the years nurtured my party, be it Mr. Vajpayee's government and the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. Point one. Point two, we have never, ever tried to support the private sector to do wrong. And our effort to clean up the system has had its pain points, undoubtedly. Now, we did not tell our bankers, or we did not do phone banking and tell our bankers to give indiscriminate loans to projects which never saw the light of day. You saw the situation between 2008 to 14. In 6 years, and ladies and gentlemen, you will all appreciate in 6 years, the public sector banks literally tripling their loan book from 18 lakh crores to 52 lakh crores. There's something fishy in that. I mean, you can't have a steel plant being set up with a loan of $5 or $6 billion from the banking system. And when you try and assess what the worth of that plant is, you're not able to come to $2 billion. You can't have power plants being set up a dime a dozen all over the country without true assessment of the demand. You can't have, for example, infrastructure projects coming up at hugely inflated prices. And we have some bankers in the room here, they will recall the pressures that were being faced to just keep indiscriminately lending. Now, artificially, that can have a short-term impact on growth. So if we were to tell our banks, now you increase that 52 lakhs to 100 lakh crores, or double the book in the next 5 years, artificially that growth or the private sector investment will look really fascinating. But is it really the need of the hour? Do we need to invest more in power plants of the traditional genre? I think all of these are issues the country has now come to start facing the reality about. We have come to realize that there was a lot of padding happening which we have stopped. We have come to realize that there were big borrowers who borrowed indiscriminately on a very low capital base, and which is today coming home to roost. You saw the layering of companies in ILFS. You saw how many promoters had no skin in the game, but set up large projects because they got a coal mine illegitimately, which the Supreme Court then had to cancel. And we felt the tremors of the impact on the private sector because of that. Now, all of these things, the country had to someday bite the bullet. And I think no better time than a leadership like Prime Minister Modi to bite the bullet to change the way this country and its business works, to encourage honest business to prosper and flourish, and make even those who may be large, big names pay for the loans that they've taken, be responsible borrowers, and be liable to pay back to the banking system, which is, after all, public deposits. It's the people of India's money that has got squandered away under the previous government, which we are trying to bring back to the system. Now, that pain point, if it has hurt some, I think the nation will forever be grateful to Prime Minister Modi for changing the needle from dishonest banking to honest banking, from changing the needle from dishonest governments to honest governance, changing the needle from capacities being indiscriminately created to capacities being prudently created, changing the needle from high-cost, high-inflation economy to an economy which is focused on controlling inflation, focused on making the life of our common citizens better, focused on last-mile delivery of government projects, honesty, so that every single rupee government spends reaches the beneficiary and is not got swindled along the way. And I think that change is well worth a little bit of private sector pain, not to say that the private sector has always covered itself with glory, be it the banking sector, be it any sector, power sector. We have more than enough examples of bad governance and bad practices in the private sector. So if I may borrow a phrase which I used to very often say before I came into government in the 2010 to 14 period, I'd just become a member of parliament, just started engaging with government and how governments work, become the party spokesperson. Very often on your channels, in your news media, I've used the phrase, it is not important who owns an enterprise. Ownership doesn't define success. It's vision and leadership that defines the success of any organization. And I think it applies to government, it applies to government-owned PSUs, it applies to the private sector, it applies to a media house. It's not the ownership that will determine the success of any business, any enterprise, any organization. It's only vision and leadership. And that's what we have provided, that's what we have worked towards in the last 5 years. The vision of Prime Minister Modi and the decisive, strong leadership that he gave that has really changed the way India works and thinks.
Just a coughing fit. It's not that his answer has left me speechless or...
No, you need not be embarrassed about it.
Not at all. I'm not a participant in these... Media is just an observer. We are not participants in any of these events.
I hope so. Not always. We have enough media with predefined prejudices in this country, and I can tell you, I dare say one person in this room, other than Vineet Jain, of course, who can stand up and vouch that Indian media is not partisan more often than not, doesn't have preconceived prejudices, and doesn't color its reporting with their own thinking. Indian media also needs to, I think, evolve into far more news rather than their own views. This certainly didn't leave the audience speechless.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you've talked about the development narratives which work in favor of, resounding return to power after 5 years. Two narratives which are said to be working against you is the agrarian, this is the agrarian distress, and also this whole issue of whether or not, the whole statistical debate, but there is some perception that not enough jobs are being created. So, yeah.
Well, as regards the agrarian crisis that you alluded to, one of the focus areas of this government has been to keep prices low, to bring inflation down. And if you will see you can talk to your wife or any of the persons here who are engaged with the industry, will tell you that this has been probably the lowest inflation in the last 5 years that the country has ever witnessed since independence. I mean, gone are the days don't know if you recall, in the 70s, we had inflation as high as 30%, 34% in September 1974. It's 34% inflation. And we are down to 2%, 2.05% last month. Food inflation at probably zero. So over the 5 years, we've consistently focused on keeping inflation down. Also, we have tried to make our farmers produce more, improve the productivity of our farmers. So today, I can proudly say that we produce all the requirements of this country. Our import dependence has come to nearly zero. As against when we came into government in 2014, the prices of pulses went up as high as 260 rupees. And I still remember in cabinet our discussions where we can get pulses from quickly, where we can get oil seeds from quickly, so that we can bring down prices. We actually had ministers rushing to different parts of the world, to countries like Mozambique and whatnot, to try and get produce into India and maintain price levels and maintain the housewives' budget at reasonable levels. From there, we did a root cause analysis where the problem was. We prioritized what the farmer needs. We stopped all the illegitimate shifting of fertilizer instead of going to the farmer, going to chemical plants. Fertilizer is highly subsidized. You remember how many agitations used to take place all over the country. Highways were blocked because fertilizer was there. But instead of going to the farmers, went to chemical factories. And there were politicians involved in that also. There are cases in courts where politicians' families have to answer for diversion of fertilizer into industry. In this, and we had a solution. It's not as if the solutions were not there. Prior to 2014, neem coating of urea had started. But the then government was restricting neem coating. They were saying you can only coat so much of the fertilizer. It beats my understanding that a good solution to a problem you are restricting. You had for the sugar industry higher output of ethanol, which would reduce our import dependence, save precious foreign exchange, improve the environment because it's less polluting than petrol. But you were restricting the use of ethanol and mixing it with petrol. This government changed that. We said we'll do 100% neem coating of fertilizer, never had one agitation for fertilizers. And as railway minister, I also monitor that no part of the country ever has a fertilizer shortage. We ensured availability of seeds. We did projects across the country. I think you're also aware of what happened in, let's take Maharashtra. 70,000 crores. The previous Congress government, Congress NCP government in Maharashtra had invested over 15 years. Not 1 hectare of land got irrigated. Devendra Fadnavis is, of course, trying to redeem those investments in infrastructure by doing the last mile investment, getting some of them off the ground. But he's also doing innovative solutions, where we are making in Jalyuk Shivir, making small ponds at the village level. And I think somewhere Times Foundation also has had some role to play in that. Small ponds, making the village and the farmers self-sufficient at the base. We don't need to always have $100 billion and $50 billion projects to solve the country's problems. Sometimes it's the low-cost, elementary solutions which matter more. In the process, what has happened is the farmer's produce has gone up, his productivity has gone up, prices have been kept low, and has certainly had some impact on that low prices on his ability to earn more. We are committed to doubling the farmer's income. We've brought in MSP for all the 22 main crops of the country. We've now brought in Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi, the PM Kisan Yojana, which will get launched tomorrow. Tomorrow at Gorakhpur, and then in the rest of the country. Simultaneously, we are launching the PM Kisan Yojana. 12 crore plus small landholders. And we are all aware, division of land over the generations has left our farmers with unviable and small landholdings. So we are giving them a token of appreciation of a nation which appreciates that they've made us self-sufficient in food grain requirement, helped food security of this country. This grateful nation is giving a small token of appreciation to our farmers. But for those of us in this room, very difficult to imagine that it may look small to us, but for that small farmer tilling half an acre, 1 acre, 1.5 acre, 6,000 rupees every year is quite a large support that will help him probably buy seed at the right time, maybe pay for his child's tuition fee at the right time. Healthcare and all almost being free now may help him pay up the interest on his bank loan so that it gets regularized and he can draw further on it. We've increased that from 1 lakh to 1,60,000 now for the farmer also. So it's been a holistic plan and a very focused approach, effort after effort, to ensure that the farmer has a better future. They understand it. Sometimes it's difficult for us in our limited horizon to be able to appreciate the impact that the Modi government's philosophy and policies over 5 years have had on the common farmer's life. And as regards job, I know my time is up, but I'll just allude to a small example of the Indian Railways, since you also talked about statistics. In the Indian Railways, every time I went outside, people would say trains are always late. But when I did my reviews in the office, my people would show me statistics which showed I'm 85, 90% on time. Why the hell are people cribbing? And this was a dilemma that was bothering me. We decided to change the way we capture data. We put logging devices, data loggers, at all the interchange points across the Indian Railways. In the initial phase, only 96 data loggers. Didn't cost a damn, not even 1 crore of rupees probably. 96 data loggers, all the interchanging points. So over 40, 50 kilometers across the railways, there was a data logger. So all the station masters on the route in between knew that even if they fudged the data, barely 20 kilometers after that, the data logger would give the right data and the guy would be in serious trouble. And most people who work with me know they can't mess around too much in my ministries at least. So everybody got the pressure of trying to put in the right data. You won't believe it. We switched on these data loggers on 1st April 2018. The punctuality numbers that I would get fell from 31st March to 1st April in one day by 20%. 20%. You go to a doctor and you don't tell him what your problem is. Instead of a heart ailment, he'll end up replacing your knee. And with a knee implant, which would in the earlier days cost 5 times what it costs today. So we, as doctors, we need to know the problem. As business managers, we all need to know the problem. We needs to know that the ad revenue is correctly reflected. If you fudge the ad revenue figures, he may see a balance sheet which shows a huge debtor of receivables on the advertising side. But then after 5 years, he'll realize the money is never going to come in. So the same way we needed to know what the real problem was. We got tracking. From June to end of July, 2 months, I personally reviewed every single zone. And my reviews are terrible, by the way. My officers will vouch for that. And I think some people have even criticized me. Some very senior journalists have written articles complaining that all the bureaucracy is very unhappy with my style of working. But those reviews gave results. We went into micro details of what can be done to improve the punctuality. And I'm happy to report to you, as the masters of my government, that we have reached back to the punctuality percentages that we were before 31st March on the aggregate. But if you look at the number of minutes lost, in the railways, the best punctuality barometer is number of trains that are delayed and the minutes multiplied by the minutes by which it is late. Bodhi, you'll be happy to know we are down to 1/3 of what it was 7 months ago. 1/3. Because we had a focused approach, we had the right data to work on which we could do the surgical strike.
Okay, thanks a lot. We'll have to skip the audience questions. I'm afraid we are well over time, so thank you.
Thank you, Piyush Goyal and Executive Editor Bodhisattva Ganguly for a very stimulating, interesting session. We are thrilled to hear of the achievements of your ministry of the government, of the passion, vision, and compassion that underlines it all. And I think the audience's reaction sums it all up brilliantly. We have one more session to go before lunch, and lunch will be served only after that session. So please stay with us as we prepare for the next session. I think the enthusiasm of Minister Piyush Goyal's words have carried over, and a lot of people are wanting to meet him and talk to him before he departs. But it is a wonderful opportunity for all to interact with him. And he does have a remarkable track record in his ministry and is one of the most brilliant ministers that perform in a very difficult portfolio with great excellence. So I am personally a great admirer of him, and I wish him the best. Now, our next session will be, after which lunch will be served, will be empowerment through social media. And for that, we will have Sandeep Bhushan, who is Director and Head of India Global Marketing Solutions at Facebook, who will be in conversation with Tanya Bhardwaj, Senior News Editor at ET Now, and they will be discussing empowerment through social media. I will give them a slight pause before inviting them onto the stage, as a lot of very important people are in animated dialogue with the Minister, Piyush Goyal, and I'm sure that it's an exchange worth having a pause, and thank you for your patience on that. Congratulations, Piyush. Normally only film stars see such adulation. So that's a big achievement. May I now invite Sandeep Bhushan and Tanya Bhardwaj to come on stage and discuss empowerment through social media. Sandeep Bhushan of Facebook and Tanya Bhardwaj, Senior Editor, ET Now. It's empowerment through social media. All over to you, after which lunch will be served.
When we build products, for example, a Facebook Lite, which lets the phones that India uses to work well with our products. When we build WhatsApp for the cheapest smart feature phone that exists, the idea is to get depth of that access and therefore create use cases. I think the other dimension, interestingly, is also what we can do more directly to build the infrastructure And many will be aware of our work on Express Wi-Fi. For example, in markets like Northeast, where the digital expansion continues to be a very significant agenda, we are working with small entrepreneurs, retailers, and backbone providers to provide internet in pocket-sized currencies. So both access and depth of access is an agenda. Let me flip it. If you look at businesses today, so there is 5 to 6 million, 50 to 60 million businesses in the country. You'd hear that, hey, listen, only 15 million of them are digitally active. So let's say 30%. If you flip the question and say, how many of them do we think have a WhatsApp account? How many small businesses in India, wherever they may be, meaning expect the person to have a phone and a smartphone, what's the chance that he has a WhatsApp account? The idea is to take internet to them rather than say they will come to the internet. And therefore, when we build an app, which is WhatsApp for Business today, which lets you do the most basic CRM, the app is now live, and as every small business should try it, that is the point of taking internet to folks with use cases that matter. And you not wait for them to come into the internet.
Yeah.
So that's our play.
Okay. I think a lot of folks in the audience would like you to give us some examples. And you talked about doing social good. So I just want to go back to what our IT minister, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, said. I think it was just 2 days ago. And he said that India can see a 5-fold increase in economic value from digital transformation by 2025. How big a role do you think Facebook can play in this sort of economic value that we're talking about, and also nation building?
Yes.
How much do you think the onus is on folks like you?
Yeah. We are privileged. Like I said, when more than 300 million people wake up to our apps, the impact can be tremendous. The numbers are pretty startling when you put them in an aggregate. So a Deloitte report a couple of years ago suggested that the impact of Facebook on world economy is $250 billion. It's still a small number in the context of the world economy, but it is a sizable number in absolute. We're talking of 40 million jobs created by small business because they now have access to markets. These are the global stats. Let's come to India. We're talking of 6 million businesses live on Facebook today. We are the internet for small business because creating a page, and all of you have seen those pages, many of you have businesses that hold those pages, costs nothing and is the easiest thing you will do on any given day. So our agenda first up is taking this economic growth possibility to the country. When we talk to these 6 million folks, and this is a Morning Consult survey, 75 to 80% will tell us that they got new customers because of this. More than half will tell us they added a job or two.
Give us some real-life examples.
So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Very, very privileged that, in fact, right now as we speak, in the Disrupt session, there's an entrepreneur talking about a business called Desi Hangover. It's a real example. It's happening live. After you go out of this, go to the Disrupt session. What is Desi Hangover? Desi Hangover says Indian craftsmen produce as good a product as any, and all that is missing, therefore, is marketing and supply chain, which means it's only the product without everything a business needs. They have built a business virtually entirely with our help and our tools. Now, that's a story, and that's happening right here. Millions of stories like this. The point, therefore, being that when you create access, when you create tooling, when you create markets, business moves. And so I think that's a great story, and you should meet the gentleman at lunch and see where that's headed.
Let's talk about some of the challenges. And again, I'm sort of going to go back to something that I just read. So it turns out India is the second fastest digital adopter amongst world economies. It turns out the fastest is Indonesia. But according to this index that was again compiled by NASSCOM and the government, while we've registered a 90% growth in digital adoption between 2014 and 2017, our value in this index is just as 32. And unfortunately, it's also the lowest among 17 countries. Now, from your vantage point, because you guys have the sort of learning in your ears to the ground, where does the divide lie? What are the challenges for the digital economy?
I think all data is good data, and it's how you look at the data. So yeah, we are X number anytime. Just plot a growth trajectory, of how India internet is moving, and 2 years later, these numbers look different, right? We continue to be optimistic because of tremendous work happening on all the three dimensions. One of infrastructure, both private and government. Second of the whole government agenda around Digital India. And third, with partners like us to build on top of that and create services. So I think it's a WIP play, and it's moving at a very fast pace, and all of us are seeing that around us. I think the interesting piece further to that is when people come on, what are the utilities on offer? So let me make the point. One of the largest reasons why businesses are on Facebook is the reason why we are on Facebook, which is communities. Let me illustrate that. One of the largest problems in this country, which is a demand-supply problem and not actually a resource problem, is blood donation. We went out and put out a product which today allows you to register yourself with a blood donation, with your blood group, and allows folks to access it, and therefore in real time you can get a ping in your location. Now what does that mean? 35 million people in the world have registered on this, and when we launched it, within the first year, 6 million Indians are on that. It's the world's largest blood donation registry. Now what just happened? We're talking of building the internet, but I think the important thing along with that is building the use cases. As we build these communities, there's an illustration of a non-business case. The business case is much easier, which is people come together to solve problems, and that creates, therefore, a positive ripple effect on why should I be on the internet as the backbone builds. That's one axis. The other axis, of course, what can we do apart from putting our products and the infrastructure out? And that is about training, which is, as we will know, a lot of small business in India, when you talk of 50 to 60 million small businesses, overall nuance on whether it's taxation, whether it's working capital support, or whether it's digital education are real barriers. Any piece of data tells us that. So what can we do about it? We have run programs that have served today more than 1 million folks. And in the next couple of years, our plan is to put 5 million more such pieces of communication and training that move 5 million entrepreneurs forward, 50 partners, 29 states. Which means India is an economy that you won't run because you've got a nice connection. It will move as we go deep into the country and move folks with the tools, because the promise is that 200 billion globally are more than a fair share that India will deserve, because we are going to be the largest internet market in the world.
Okay, since we're talking about empowerment through, the social media, how can I not sort of talk about what we've seen lately, and which is women challenging the status quo through movements like Me Too? What is Facebook's plan when it comes to sort of trying to bring more women entrepreneurs on board? I mean, are there readily available tools and resources for anybody in this room that, sort of wants to know?
Yeah. I think if we go back all the way when internet first turned up, and then we figured that we can find communities, we can connect with the world, take that example to every socio-economic class that's a step behind on any dimension. Now, it's a fact that there are significant gender issues in women being able to access work or business. The contra to that is the space of social offers you the best way to be where you are and yet access education, markets, and inspiration. Let me give you a story. Pabi Ben is a local artisan deep in Rajasthan. Markets her products entirely on Facebook, has 60 women working with her, and she has not a high school education. And you can go to Pabi Ben's Facebook page or pabiben.com today to see this inspirational story. What are we talking about? We're talking about a person who did not have to go to another city and ask somebody's permission, can I go there, dear husband or dear dad? We're talking about access to markets, which there was no formal education for. How do you assess market? Very simple. You put your bags out, you try and see if a certain market responds to that offering, and then you scale both your offering and your communication. We, of course, assume that the product's at the back and the ecosystem building the product is damn good, which we know in this case. I've sampled those products. I bought one for my wife. It cost me $850, but was more than fair value, and I thought there was a premium that they could charge even further. This access to me and my willingness to pay price came because she can target me on Facebook.
Yeah, she's the same one who restored some sort of needlework, right?
That's fantastic. So that's the Indian karigari on top of that. So the other axis is therefore inspiration. One of the larger conversations, I was in the women panel just running parallel to ours, is about inspiration. Hey, can I do it? Is it for me? Is it happening? More women than men tell us that they're inspired by mentors who've made it in business. We are talking of a significant socio-economic cleavage here from the current narrative of, hey, business is 85-90% men, 10% women. Need not be. Because you are letting the person be and creating access, education, inspiration, I think the narrative is about the change that's possible. And Payuben is just the most wonderful story.
Wonderful. Okay, my last question then. You know, in the face of, well, to put it mildly, the challenges that we're seeing in you know, the tech space, especially for folks like you, whether it's data privacy and you know, data theft and so on and so forth, you know, government backlash and things like that. How is Facebook still managing to convince you know, the world and businesses that technology is still a force for good?
Yeah. And again, two pieces to this problem. I think there is absolutely no denying that data, privacy, safety is a binary. It is a yes or a no. There cannot be a half-hearted effort on any side. And I think as you see in the course of the last year and coming soon in this year, very significant plays to make sure data transparency, security, and control are with the consumer. That's non-negotiable. The other piece is, what is the opportunity that internet provides and Facebook provides for businesses? We talked about growth. Let me give a simple example. The biggest thing the internet has done is created entrepreneurs who don't have to break the bank to start an ad campaign. Because you target by Salem, Tirupur, Erode, Tundla, ETA as your market and not HSM, not UP. Because that's what your supply chain can offer. Can you imagine how much overheads you've just cut from the system? Second is growth itself. We saw the number of the 200 billion. The third is actually business results. As long as businesses find results, they're going to evaluate us from that hardcore business lens. We are in business with businesses because we move there. Goods. And when you look at businesses, we talked about Payuben, we talked about small businesses. You go to a small player who's come into the world starting to find fashion glasses for at an affordable price. Glassic, 30% of business comes only because of WhatsApp. Go all the way to L'Oreal, and there are case studies of business impact on Garnier Men. So for the biggest brands in the world, and my friends from L'Oreal are here, to the emerging business of the world, my friends from the small business are here, the case is very easy to make. The question is, how can we hasten the movement of access and training? And that's the whole point of our 5 million outreach currently, because the case is very clear. If we move business, business stays with us. And yet the data issue is a binary. So we have to work on both dimensions. I think we're making progress, and I think through the year we should see many pieces there.
All right, Sandeep, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Great
Thank you.
chatting with you.
That's a terrific session by Sandeep and Tanya. Sandeep Bhushan and Tanya Bharadwaj. Lunch is served in Rani Bagh and Raja Bagh outside with beautiful dishes by the Taj Mahal Hotel awaiting you. But don't get carried away. We expect you all back in 45 minutes. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience and sharing this wonderful day with all of us. Thank you.
With the India Innovation Hub, not only did we get a chance to showcase our project alongside like-minded companies, but also got the chance to get valuable insights from mentors from Facebook.
सोचा मैं एक आपदे वास्ते एक फेसबुक पेज बना लेना है जो कोई मैं प्रोड्यूस वेचनी हुंदी सी ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਪਾ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਸੀਗਾ
I can be a small change to to somebody's life, which I think is a big achievement for me.
Look above and see the light, stars and sunny skies. Share and spread the color, sparkling bright, and I'm in heaven. Oh, in heaven. When magic takes flight, dreams they come alive, making a world that only I can see, and I'm in heaven.
Tomorrow is shaped by imagination and steel. Tata Steel. We also make tomorrow.
आज फिर मशीन बंद हो गई। मशीन तो ठीक है, बिजली धोखा दे गई। केबल ही घटिया है।
मानो या न मानो, आज भी कई औद्योगिक क्षेत्रों में बिजली की कमी के कारण हजारों लोगों को खाली हाथ घर लौटना पड़ता है। तो क्यों न एक ऐसा पावर केबल चुने जो बिजली बचाए, बिजली का घाटा रोके और शॉर्ट सर्किट का जोखिम घटाए। चुने रवीन केबल्स। रवीन केबल्स उत्पादक।
Steal the sun.
Ravin Solar Solutions. Why not steal the sun?
Yep, 1, 2, 3, 4. One, two, three, four. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Yeah.